Alright, so what I'm going to do up here is I'm going to try to fix some of those things that I talked about on my painting. Let's see here. Having a hard time just kind of arranging things here. One of these days I'm going to drop paint all over my computer. Okay, so one of the things that I talked about is my background. I felt like my burnt umber kind of got washed out a bit, so I'm going to try and bring that back a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry, the wrong color. Okay, let's see. So this is obviously, I'm working into a surface that's already dry. So color is going to go down quite a bit stronger. And it's not going to move as much as it did when I first used or first applied paint to this background, which is fine. I'm actually going to try to take advantage of that. And hopefully that'll help me kind of solve my problem of the burnt umber being a little bit washed out. Now remember on the background, you know, we're going about this area quite a bit looser and more kind of experimental, so you're kind of letting the watercolor do its thing, so to speak. So having some of these areas where the paint kind of, you know, bled or created almost like stained marks on there, I would let that stuff happen. So I think that's going to help the background just have a little bit more interest to it. Just using a smaller brush here to get in between some of these tight areas. And if I need anything to blend out, I'll just kind of add a bit of water in that area to help it blend out. So it's all, you know, today's just all about trying to find those areas that need to be pushed farther. Contrast is always a part of the discussion when you're in the final stages of a painting. Not only that, but like color temperature, so parts that need to be warmer, cooler, that sort of thing. And then I also felt like, too, I could go ahead and I'll let that dry and see what that looks like after it dries. Of course, things change with watercolor as they dry. Always dries a little bit lighter. One to go in and kind of add some more of this indigo blue over here on this side. Just to push this a little bit more. And when I do this, I'm not, again, I don't want to overpaint in an area. So when I'm putting down the color, I'm very, very gentle with my brush. I'm not pushing it or digging it into the painting surface. I'm just kind of adding the color and then just basically walking away and letting it go. Because I don't want to abuse the paper. Going to kind of pick some areas to just push color a little bit more, and then just let it kind of move and do what it's going to do in that background. Again, I don't want to overpaint an area and start removing the color that I put down, so being pretty gentle. Alright, so put another layer of the burnt umber and the indigo blue in the background. I'm going to let that dry because, you know, again, things change a lot. I'm going to work on, since I've got indigo blue already on my brush, I'm going to work on darkening up my cast shadows where I think they need to be darker. And again, I don't recommend having your paper towel on top of your project like I do. I just have it on here so you can see it on the screen. Now's the time to really push your values. You should see the form popping out. You should see the color of the light. Kind of let that dry. Work in another area. So you're just at the stage where you're picky. This is when you know you're getting close to getting done with your project, as you're getting picky about parts. That dry. And then another thing, I thought I needed to make this side of this front planter darker. I'm going to try and do that by just laying down another wash of this blue right on top very lightly. Again, I don't want to overpaint, so I'm just going to put a layer on here and then walk away. I think those other sides are good. So while this area is kind of drying, I still need to darken up the cast shadow right there. A little trick I want to show you guys. So this happens to me a lot. You are going to have some of what I refer to as the bright and shiny spots. The brightest, shiniest spots are going to be white. Okay? I always try my best to leave those white as I work on my watercolor painting, but inevitably I paint over them. This isn't breaking any rules, but one of the things that I like to do I've got in this little container just a little bit of white acrylic paint. I'm going to take my really tiny brush. I'm just going to take a little bit of white acrylic paint. And I'm just going to paint that right where I see those bright and shiny spots. Again, these are just really small areas. You're not going to see large areas of white. You're just going to see them hitting just small areas. And these are spots that I tried would be the emphasized word here. I tried to keep them white, but did not succeed at that. So, and I'm using my little brush just because, I mean, we're talking about just really tiny areas. So I'm just going to use a little white paint to pull those out. I see a lot of them just right on the top rim of these pots. So that's about the only place I'm going to be putting them. And again, we're not talking about a lot of paint here. So you're not going to be painting an entire section with this. Now here's the important thing you need to know with this is that once you paint this acrylic paint down, you cannot put watercolor on top of it. So this is a last step. Because if you do try to paint on top, the acrylic paint's going to it's going to get resisted. It's going to create a resist. So the watercolor paint will not go down on top. So I'm just kind of building up some of these areas, just going back over. Want them to look bright white. My brush was a little dirty, so I've got some blue paint kind of mixing up with it. So when you think you're ready, I can make up a couple more of these cups. I just have this little cup with just a little bit of white acrylic paint in it that you are more than welcome to use. And again, I'm just using my watercolor brush here. One thing you need to remember about acrylics is that once they dry, they're permanent. So you do not want the paint to dry on your brush. So after you're finished, wash off that acrylic really well and just leave that acrylic paint to dry. So that's how we get those bright and shiny spots back. You might see some on your plants too, but most of you are just going to see it probably on the top rim or maybe on the brightest side of your pot. But again, it's going to be a really small spot, not much at all. So there you go. So I'm going to keep working on this, but that's just some of my finishing touches, and then I will post a picture of what this looks like when I'm done with at least all the demo steps. I probably will never finish those two plants. So there you go.